Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Powermax Care and Optimization. I'm Michelle Avila, and I'm your moderator for today. We are expecting a very large crowd of people. This could actually be a record for a Hypertherm webinar. So while you are getting situated and people are figuring out volume and all that, I'll just go through a few slides about Hypertherm. Hypertherm was founded in 1968 in Hanover, New Hampshire. We are an associate-owned company, so a fancy way of saying we are an employee-owned company with more than 1,400 associates around the globe. We devote more engineering resources to plasma cutting research and development than any other company, and currently have more than 160 U.S. cutting patents. Globally, our patent number is in excess of 500 patents, and we are continuously working to improve the cut quality, productivity, operating cost, and reliability of our systems. Our products: Hypertherm has plasma, laser, water jet products. We have Hypertherm automation, so our CNCs and our torch height controls. Software, we have our ProNest CAD/CAM nesting software, Design to Fab, Rotary 2 Pro, and then Robot Master, which is 3D robotic software. And consumables, we make plasma, laser, water jet consumables for both Hypertherm and non-Hypertherm cutting systems. Some quick housekeeping. These are questions that I get during every webinar, so I'll answer them now and hopefully save you having to type in a question. You will receive a copy of the webinar slides that you're going to see today. You'll see a link to watch the recorded version of this webinar, along with a certificate of attendance in case your company tracks training hours. I know some companies like to do that. Questions are welcome at any time. On the right-hand side of your screen, there's the GoToWebinar control panel. You'll see a questions bar there. You can type in your questions and hit submit. We will likely wait until the end of the webinar to answer any questions that you might have, but we will monitor questions as they are coming in, and if we feel that a question is particularly pertinent to something that we are covering, we may jump in right then and there and answer your question for you. Associates who don't need to be at Hypertherm physically in our facilities, we're all working from home, so this could also be the first webinar where we are all in different places. But we have Brenda Mahoney and Harry Malott. They are on our Powermax team. Harry specializes on the system side, while Brenda is specializing on our consumables. So that's how you're going to see the presentation broken up today. And Scott Almstrom, who is one of our technical service engineers, he is also on the line to help with questions. So Scott might be chiming in as well.
Thank you, Michelle. And welcome, everybody. Today's presentation covers a number of things. First off, we're going to talk about Powermax power supply and torch. We're going to cover that in about a 15-minute time frame. And then Brenda's going to cover consumable maintenance and optimization for Powermax consumables. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about all of the resources that we have available to you for older systems. And that should take roughly around 10 minutes. Okay, let's get right into it. The benefits of regular system maintenance. So before we get into the details of maintaining the power supply, torch, and consumables, I just wanted to go over some of the basic benefits of proper system maintenance. And oftentimes what comes to the forefront is the benefit of safety. You want to be able to identify any safety risks with these parts and consumables and power supplies before a problem occurs, before an incident occurs. Furthermore, you want to be able to maintain the original system performance. That includes the cut and gouge quality and the speed, the cut capacity, and to enable consistent starting from first time to use it for many years down the road. Then you want to also reduce the cost of ownership and operation. So by prolonging the consumable life and maintaining the system, you can get longer component life. You can reduce your costs there. And of course, as you maintain the system over time, you won't have to be replacing that system when it does fail or reach the end of its life. So you can lower the expense with new system purchases. And then last but not least, to ensure greater uptime, you can have fewer change out of consumables and spend less time troubleshooting problems, contacting tech support or your local distributor. So many benefits of system maintenance, and that's the reason why we're doing this webinar, and we'll get right into it now. Moving on to torch maintenance. So Hypertherm offers a wide range of torch styles for the Powermax systems. So regardless of the torch that you may have, you make sure you inspect the torch body. So there, when you're doing that work, you want to look for any cracks or exposed wires in the torch body. And of course, if there are any cracks, you want to get the right replacement kits to repair that torch. You also want to inspect the various switches on the torch. So there's a switch in behind the consumables. So when doing this inspection, you want to make sure the power's off, but you remove the consumables and look at that cap sensor switch. That is a safety switch that is up inside the consumables. Make sure there's no debris collecting in that area of the torch. And then for handheld torches, make sure the safety trigger is working properly. I've seen a number of cases where they've been cracked or taped back or cut off. That's there for a reason, and it prevents accidental firing of the torch. So you want to make sure that's free of debris and is working properly. And then on the Duramax lock style torches that go with the Powermax 45 XP, they have a torch lock switch. So on the handheld torches, it's on top of the torch, and on a machine torch, it's on along the barrel. There, you want to make sure that that switch is full or debris free. And in this instance, you want to make sure the power supply is on. Engage that torch. Make sure the LED on the power supply activates. That's to ensure that everything's working properly. And then the frequency of doing this, we recommend that you do this every time you pick up the torch at the beginning of the day. If you're sharing torches among operators, you also want to make sure that some of these things are working properly, just to ensure your safety and performance. All right, moving on. Now let's talk a little bit about cords, leads, and cable maintenance. Specifically, the power cord that goes into the power supply. There, you should be looking for jacket wear because those do get dragged along rough surfaces, and over time, the jacket can wear. We want to make sure that there's a solid strain relief where the cord connects to the back of the power supply, and of course, that there's no exposed wires. If there's jacket wear or exposed wires, obviously, we want to replace that power cord, and of course, that's a repair item that we offer for replacement. Moving on to the torch and work lead. Again, inspect the jacket for wear and exposed wires. Our torch work leads are not something that we recommend repair. So if it is damaged, we recommend that you get a replacement torch because it's not can safely be done in the field. And so therefore we recommend a complete replacement of the torch. You also want to check for connection points for debris and make sure that there's solid connection. So where the torch lead plugs into the power supply, make sure that there's no debris in the pinouts in that connection point in the fast connect style connection. And also the DIN style connector for the work lead. Make sure that's nice and clean and tightens down into the power supply because you don't want any arcing going on there between the DIN connector and the power supply. Moving on to communication cables. Again, inspect for jacket wear. Make sure that there's a solid strain relief in place and that there are no exposed wires. And I have seen in the field where some people have tapped into the raw arc voltage of the power supply. They haven't purchased the original kit that's designed to allow that to be done, and therefore wires are running outside of the metal cover of the power supply. It's not being routed through the back panel of the power supply and using the proper strain relief that's designed for this particular modification. If that's the case, I encourage you to go online, look for that kit and get that kit and install that cable properly to avoid any issues and safety concerns with doing it the way I previously described. Also regarding communication coils, if they're not properly dealt with, they can create noise, electrical noise, which will affect mechanized applications. So we want to uncoil all the cables, communications cables, as well as the work lead to avoid any electrical noise issues. So the photo on the right is actually how we ship them. That's not how you should pair these cables when in use. You want to uncoil them to avoid any electrical noise issues. The frequency here, we recommend that you do these types of inspections and maintenance every 3 months, depending on the condition of these leads and cords. You may need to do it sooner and replace any issues or replace any cables that have been damaged. You know, we do offer a lead jacket cover for the torch leads, which help prolong the life of those leads and protect them from damage, such as molten metal falling onto the leads, as well as debris and metal being dropped on the leads by accident. So it's one way to prolong the life of your torches, because they can be quite pricey to repair or replace. Moving on to the power supply itself, and every use, we recommend that you look at the fault identification lights, and if there's any fault lights on, correct any faults before use. You want to make sure that you have the right air pressure and everything's working properly. You have the right incoming voltage. There's no under voltage conditions and so on and so forth. So just look at the power supply, make sure that everything's working as expected. A little bit more on the power supply. A lot of debris will collect on the various labels, particularly the consumable labels, the safety labels that are on the power supply. So you want to look at the labels and replace those as well. You know, there's control panel labels. Sometimes they'll start to peel back, or there's wear around the buttons where they're often pushed. So replace the labels as needed. We do have a complete label kit that we offer for every power supply that we sell. And so you can do a complete change out of all your labels just by ordering the replacement kit. And that should be done every 3 months. Air filters, one of my favorite topics. As we all know, when you're using plasma, we require clean, dry, oil-free air for optimal performance. This requires regular maintenance of the air filter that's included with the power supply, or any accessory filters that you may have attached to the power supply or in the air line. So we recommend that you remove the metal guard and the filter bowl from the assembly on the power supply or the accessory filter. Inspect that filter element, inspect the filter bowl and the O-ring. Replace the element as needed. Oftentimes they'll get clogged and start looking pretty nasty. If the O-ring is worn or been pinched, we recommend you replacing the O-ring. And in some cases, sometimes due to high pressure, a filter bowl can become cracked, particularly the plastic ones. So look for cracks, and if there's any visible damage, recommend replacing it. That's to ensure you get proper airflow into the system and it works as expected. And we recommend you do this monthly. It's important to maintain clean, dry air. And you also need to look at your air compressor. If you're running compressed air, follow the recommended maintenance procedures for your air compressor. Oftentimes we encourage people to purge any moisture out of the lines before using a plasma system, and that's just a good maintenance step as well. Make sure you're prolonging the life of that filter element by removing the oil and moisture that's built up in the lines between use.
Hey, Harry, it's Michelle. I'm going to jump in here with just a couple of things. First of all, there are some folks who are having trouble with the audio. I apologize for that. As I said at the top of the webinar, we are all working from home and in remote areas of New Hampshire, which is where Hypertherm is headquartered. So there will be some audio issues. I'm sure internet, it can be a little iffy. So again, apologies for that. And finally, a question that I wanted to ask Harry that we just jumped in, because it does have to do kind of with what you're talking about. Someone wants to know if the filter that that's supplied with the power supply, is that sufficient enough to remove moisture from the air, or do people also need an auxiliary dryer as well?
Great question, and thank you for that. Depending on your situation, if you're located in a part of the world where there's a lot of humidity and there's a lot of buildup of moisture in your compressor and in your lines, we do recommend that you put in a dryer. Oftentimes, what we encourage our distributors to do when they're selling a power supply, because the filter that does come with the system is more of a water separator, we encourage that our distributors also encourage our customers to buy the accessory filter that we provide. It's a 1 micron filter. It's really going to remove any of the moisture, oil, and debris from getting into the the lower micron filter that is included with the power supply. So hopefully I've answered your question. Again, it depends on your situation, but the important thing is that you maintain clean, dry, oil-free air going into the power supply. That's almost paint shop quality air that you need to provide to the system for optimal performance. All right, moving on. Power supply maintenance, and we recommend that this procedure be done every 6 months. And again, it kind of depends on your environment in which you're in. If you maintain a clean shop and you're not using the power supply all that frequently, well, this may not be done every 6 months. You may only want to look at the power supply interior every 1 month. But we do recommend that you remove the cover, using compressed air or shop vac, remove any dust and debris that's accumulated on the power inside the power supply over time, because that fan does pull in ambient air conditions. So there will be dust that collects inside the power supply, mostly on what we call the clean side. We have a pretty good power supply design where we try to isolate all that debris and dust from collecting on the power board. So we have a divider wall inside of our design that essentially keeps the power board and the sensitive electronic components from collecting debris and dust. So when you do this type of maintenance procedure, we want to make sure that you're not blowing dust from the dirty side of the power supply onto the clean side of the power supply. So just take care when doing this. And again, really depends on your situation, how often you need to do this work. So that's what I have on torch, lead, power supply maintenance, and cable maintenance. From this point on, I'm going to transfer this presentation over to Brenda Mahoney, and she's going to cover Powermax consumable maintenance.
Thank you, Harry.
Yeah, sorry, it's Michelle again. I'm going to jump in. We had someone suggest a great tip for those of you who are having audio issues, and I realize if you're having audio issues, you may not even be able to hear me. But if you're using your computer audio, you may want to try using telephone, and the phone number to call for that is 1-877-309-2074. You may have better luck using the phone versus computer audio. So again, the phone number is 877-309-2074. Okay, I'm done. Go ahead, Brenda.
Thank you, Michelle. Hopefully everybody can hear me. We are going to talk about Powermax consumables. I think, Harry, you're still going to be my driver. So if you want to proceed to the next slide. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to go over each of these parts, and we're going to talk about the role that each of the consumable plays in the plasma process. And then we're going to point out recognizable signs of wear, and then some recommended change out conditions. So the first one we're going to start with is the electrode. Depending on which Powermax system you may have, your electrode could look like one of the images that's in front of you. We do offer a variety of electrodes. Some have longer life to them, such as our Copper Plus electrode. But essentially, the function of these electrodes is all the same. They play the main role of providing power to the plasma arc. The center of each electrode contains an insert, and that insert is basically the attachment point for the arc. So it involves an element which has a very high melting point. And in this case, we would refer to that as the hafnium being that center point. And it has to withstand that extreme heat of the plasma arc. And that's really the part of the consumable that's going to wear. So if we go to the next slide, what you're going to see, just to give you a better visual of where that insert is, and you can see on the right-hand side, we recommend a depth point to be measuring against to figure out how much that hafnium insert has eroded. Now, I recognize that that's very difficult to do, to be able to identify exactly where that is in its wear. So really what we wanted to point out were some other things that I think should be more obvious. And the first is that if you're cutting and you feel the need to slow down, or basically the inability to cut the material, that's a sure sign that your electrode is probably ready for inspection for wear. Now, in some cases, we've had people that have really gone too far with the electrode before replacing it. And what they'll see is they'll start to see like a green discoloration of the arc or fumes. That is definitely a telltale sign that you need to replace that electrode. You might also see some excessive dross starting to form. So all of these are indicators for you to change. And I think from a change standpoint, of all of the things in the stack up, the electrode, and then we're going to move on to the nozzle, are the ones that you're probably replacing the most frequently. So we'll move to the next slide, which is talking about the nozzle. So the function of the nozzle is essentially that it's focusing the arc. And so what you may notice with nozzles, depending on which system you have and if you're using multiple processes, is that not all nozzles are designed the same. In fact, the design really focuses on the orifice of the nozzle, because that design determines how that arc is going to be directed. So an example of this is gouging nozzles. Some of you that may have bought a new Powermax system and it comes with a set of consumables may have seen that you have a gouging nozzle in your setup. And we've had many customers that have mistakenly put a gouging nozzle onto their torch, thinking that they were going to cut with it, and found that the results weren't what they expected, and rightly so, because that orifice on the gouging nozzle is designed to move metal, not necessarily cut through it. So it's very important that you recognize which nozzle you're using, and that also, depending again on the system that you have, I'll say like a Powermax 105, for example, using the right nozzle for the right amperage and thickness of what you're trying to cut is very important. We recognize that a lot of people don't necessarily change the amperage on their system or change the nozzle, but if you're really looking to improve consumable life, that's one thing that you could consider is, looking at the thickness of what you're trying to cut and making sure that you have the system set up and the correct consumable selected to do that process. But the nozzle, again, is one that you're probably replacing the most frequently because it's essentially taking the brunt of the plasma heat. So if we move to the next slide, we can give you some visuals of what to look for in terms of nozzle wear. So because heat can affect the shape of the orifice, which is, again, the important part of the nozzle design because it's directing the arc, the things that you might experience as signs of wear is that your cut speed becomes slower. You may have a less constricted arc, which can cause the kerf to widen. And really, when you're looking at the nozzle to determine whether or not you should replace it, the things you should be looking for are nicks or notches, or the orifice just being out of round or starting to go oval. So hopefully these visuals give you a good idea of what you should be looking for when you need to replace. So transitioning to the next slide, the recommendation that Hypertherm makes when it comes to electrodes and nozzles is that you replace them at the same time. Now, I recognize that this is not frequently the case. I think, depending on how much you use your plasma system, can make a difference in terms of when you replace. I think for the most part, people might replace every 2 times that they've replaced a nozzle, they may replace the electrode. But the thing that we want you to look for, and these are some other indicators that can cause some issues, is flow rate. So low flow rates can lead to almost immediate nozzle destruction, because it can cause the arc to basically attach, and you would really just knock that nozzle out of commission right off the bat. And then allowing your electrode to wear down too far, it can not only cause issues in terms of your performance, but it can cause some catastrophic damage, including torch damage. So it's really important that when you do go to change your consumables, that you look at them, because it can go beyond the effect of not having good cut quality. It can really cause some serious damage. So that's essentially why we recommend replacing them at the same time. So we'll move on to the next consumable. This is the shield. So as you can see, again, we offer a variety of shields depending on the application that you're doing. Primary function is to protect the other consumables, especially the nozzle, because as we mentioned, the nozzle does take the brunt of the heat. And shields also have an orifice, and that orifice is designed to align with the nozzle. And they may also have some additional vent holes depending on the style of shield that you're using. So for example, drag shields, which have those castellations, those are designed to set the torch height so the flattest part of the arc is cutting the metal. And it's also specifically designed so if, say, you're using a template where you can just place that shield right down and drag it along. So, recognizing the different types of shields that we have, you'll see that, again, the orifice designs can change. Gouging, again, has that wider orifice, similar to the gouging nozzle. So things to look for when needing to replace the shield. If we go to the next slide, we have some good visuals there. Things that you should be looking for, again, is making sure that the orifice, if it's still perfectly round, then it's still good to use. A lot of times what people will do is they may take a wire brush and clear some of that debris and dross away, which will make it easier for you to be able to inspect the shield. But if you're using a drag shield, for example, and you have worn castellations, like you see in this image, that's a sure sign that you should replace it. And then again, any damage to the main orifice, or if you have clogged vent holes that you're not able to clean away, that's a good sign that you should be replacing that nozzle. That shield. Easy to get your parts mixed up. Okay, so we'll move to the next part, which is the swirl ring. Now, I think we've heard from quite a few customers that this is a part that you probably do not replace frequently. We've even had some customers say to us, I didn't know that I needed to replace that part. But the thing about the swirl ring, and again, this one is very, very dependent on how frequently and what you're doing with use of your Powermax system. But the swirl ring plays an important role. It controls the swirling action of the gas flow around the electrode, and it centers the arc on the electrode and nozzle, which is really how you're directing your arc. So the quality of your cut is very highly dependent on that flow pattern. So when you're looking for things, when it comes to the swirl ring, and even with these images, I'll admit it can be hard to see. You're looking for damage. So the swirl ring, again, it's being affected by the heat. So you can have some cracking, you can get some clogged holes, you might even have some deformations like shrinkage. So it is important that you inspect it. Some of our swirl rings come with an O-ring, and in which case there should have been included a small tube of lubricant. We do recommend that you inspect that, make sure that you have applied some lubricant, not too much. You can be moderate with it. But yeah, I think it's in general with the swirl ring, I would say it's one of those parts that when you're taking the stack up apart to replace an electrode and nozzle, it's worthwhile to just take a look at that part and see what condition that it's in. And I think if we go to the next, and so last but not least is the retaining cap. Again, this is probably not a part that you replace very frequently, and it is highly dependent on your use. You know, the main role of the retaining cap is to hold the consumables in place for proper alignment. And I would say the thing that you probably want to look at the most is inspect the threads, because over time, dirt and debris can build up and really do some damage to those threads. And then you want to also inspect areas that are worn due to heat exposure. So a good example of that is if you're using the system for gouging, that's taking the arc is on for longer, and you're putting a lot of heat there. So you really should take a look at that part and make sure you don't have any worn areas, because that would be a sure sign that you should replace those consumables. So moving to the next, we want to talk about some consumable resources. So everything that I covered here today, we've actually made into some convenient, very short video clips, one for each part of the stack up. And those can be found on our hypertherm.com site. In this case, you'd be navigating to the Powermax consumable page, and you'll be able to find those clips. And I think they're really good references, particularly if you have somebody that's new to plasma and you want to introduce them, and it gives really good, strong visuals on what to look for. And again, understanding the role that those consumables play makes a big difference in understanding when you should replace, because usually your sign is what's happening with the performance. So you have on that page, you have the consumable educational videos. You also have our consumable catalog, which is a nice way of looking up what are all of the available processes for your Powermax system. It also includes information on some of our older Powermax systems. And then on this page, you'll also find reference to what we refer to as our specialty consumables. So while we didn't cover these specifically in the wear and care, we have really expanded the opportunity of what you can do with your Powermax system, and that's through the use of different consumables. So the image that you're seeing there is we have flush cut consumables for cutting close to the base plate, removing attachments. And then we also have our high access consumables, which can be used for cutting and gouging in hard to reach places. So that's just a good source of consumable resources for you to refer to. And then, as Harry mentioned, the other topic that we just wanted to point out to you, which I think if he goes to the next slide, revolves around what we have for resources for older Powermax systems. So, we really design our systems to be built for reliability. So we recognize that many of you might have what we consider to be an older Powermax system. And what we wanted to be able to do is provide you with some resources to just know what's the status, of your product, what's available in order for you to best maintain that older system. Some of our older systems, we have created what we would refer to as a retrofit torch. And that retrofit torch is an upgrade from your original torch. It can bring you to a new platform of consumables that might provide better performance and life overall. And, we have these resources now on hypertherm.com. They're product pages for these legacy systems, what you're looking at in that image to the right. And it just gives you information on planning, when you're making the decision whether or not you want to upgrade to a brand new system, or whether you just want to see what you can do to maintain your current system. These are really good resources. Also contains links to your operator manuals, which I'm sure can go missing pretty quick. So it's just, it's just a good amount of resources for you to be able to refer to. Harry, I don't know if you're muted or not muted. I don't know if you had anything you also wanted to add on this topic.
Yeah, thank you, Brenda. I think you covered it very well. These resources are there to help future planning. They're at some point in time where you decide to move on to another system because for whatever reason, perhaps we've no longer offer support, or we no longer offer replacement parts or consumables, that kind of information is available to you on this portion of our website. So you can plan in the future whether you need to upgrade a torch or consumables, or move on to another generation of Powermax systems.
Great.
All right. So that pretty much concludes our presentation, other than Michelle has some slides here about more ways to learn. Our website has a wealth of information from additional webinars that have been recorded and available to you to watch, to the Cutting Institute, links there where you can log in and take a variety of courses relating to plasma cutting and operation. And then, of course, we offer on-site training for large customers. So please go there, check out our website, and if you have any questions about those resources, do let us know. If there's things that are missing that you think we ought to be providing to our customer base around the world, we'd love to hear it. So with that said, I think we could probably move on to our Q&A session.
Yes, that's right. There are a lot of people on the line. There are lots of questions, so we'll try to get through as many questions as we can. Anything that we cannot answer live, we will get a response to you afterwards. So Harry, let's start with your advice that people remove the cover from their system to clean the inside of it. There were some questions around warranty. People are concerned that their warranty might be voided if they open up the machine. And then someone else is a little frustrated that they took off their cover and stripped the brass screws that I guess hold the cover onto the system. Do you have any tips on getting the cover off easily, and any comments on the warranty and how opening up your system might impact that?
Yes, doing that 6 months maintenance of the interior of the power supply is recommended. It's outlined in our manual, and it would not void your warranty if you were to do that. It's a recommended procedure to prolong the life of your system. So it's the right thing to do. And so all of our Powermaxes have a 3-year power supply warranty. So within that 3-year period, as long as you're just doing that kind of work, you're cleaning the inside, you're not hosing it down with a water hose, you're using clean, dry, compressed air to clean out the inside, or shop vac to vacuum off any debris. If you're doing it that way, then your warranty should be covered if there's any issues with the power supply afterwards. And then the question regarding stripping out the screws, yeah, you do need to take care when removing screws. You want to strip out the heads or the little grommets on the inside. I think we do have replacement screws. If you need to contact us, we can send you some new ones. The grommets, on the other hand, I think you may have to tap them out and put in larger screws if indeed they were damaged.
Okay. All right, Robert, and we'll get back to you after the webinar too, just to make sure that you're all squared away with that. Scott, were there any questions that you'd like to answer? I know there are a lot coming in.
Sure. There was one about the 30 air, about the filter maintenance on a 30 air. There is an inlet air filter that we want to make sure is clean. That's on the back of the machine. And there's also in the center of the machine, you'd have to take off the cover, but in the center of the machine, there is a water separator that has a float in it. And then that drain does go out the bottom. We want to make sure that drain is free and not clogged up, and that goes right out the bottom of the case. There was a question about the work lead. Can we have more than one work lead on a system? I suspect this individual wants to maybe have one work lead that's dedicated to his cutting table, and then maybe have a separate work lead that he could use a hand torch on and cut a piece of steel separately so he doesn't have to unbolt it. That's fine. We can't have more than one work lead hooked up at a time. It does have that DINS connector on it, so there would be a pretty easy change out.
Question here about cleaning consumables. do we recommend that people clean their consumables?
Yeah, I think that's a frequent practice. Probably the one that gets cleaned the most is the shield. I know people have taken like a wire brush to it to, prolong the life of it. And I think, as mentioned in the presentation, once you do that, you should be inspecting the orifice to make sure that it's still fully and round. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with cleaning them for sure. But you just want to make sure that you're familiar with what you should be looking for in order to replace them.
I'd like to add to that, when doing any kind of cleaning to consumables, please make sure the power is off to the power supply and the consumables are removed from the torch. I've seen people have a little bit of debris built up in the castellations of the drag shield, and they'll take a little pick and pick away at it. And yeah, you may have your finger off the torch trigger, but there's always that chance where something could go wrong and arc will come out, and you don't want to be in that situation. So always remove your consumables from your torch. Power off.
Is the manual the place to get the most recent updated cut charts? I think the answer there is yes. I don't know, Harry, but Brenda, if you have anything to add to that.
Yes, cut charts do get updated as new ones are available, but sometimes they do lag behind the release of those actual cut charts because, logistics of getting the manuals updated and translated into all the languages that we put them out in. But in some cases where you have mechanized applications, those cut charts are available for download, particularly through our HCI, not an HCI website, but they are available, I think, through the doc library for download for updates. And you can get them in various formats. You want to add to that?
I've found that there's many revisions to every operator manual, which has the cut charts in it, and they're also downloadable online.
Thank you.
So I'll jump in again with the question, will increasing the flow rate extend the life of your consumables?
I think making sure you have the proper flow rate is what's going to make sure that you're going to get the best life out of your consumables. So if that flow rate, for example, is too low, that's when you're gonna run into issues. So really making sure that you have everything set to the parameters as outlined in your manual is the right way to go.
Yeah, to make sure that you have the right mode of operation selected. If you're cutting, make sure you're in the cutting mode, and vice versa with gouging, because the mode selection does affect the gas flow to the torch.
Right.
Does post flow on the Powermax 45 increase over time? And I imagine that would refer to any of the Powermax systems.
No, I don't believe it does. I believe the post flow time is set.
Yeah, you're correct, Scott. The post flow is set for each system, and I believe it's set at a 5-second post flow, whether you're in cutting mode or gouging mode. The only deviation flow is with the Powermax 45 XP. So if somebody's using argon for marking, in order to reduce the operating costs and lower the gas consumption of argon gas, which is expensive gas, we have designed the system to recognize that you're marking, so you're at low amperage, you're in the gouging mode. And so when the system recognizes those conditions, it eliminates the post flow to save gas costs or to lower gas costs.
Thank you, Harry. Let's see. So is starting and stopping the arc a big factor in consumable wear? As an example, is it better to start and stop the arc when cutting expanded metal, or is it better to keep the arc triggered or engaged between all the sections?
No, it's okay. I thought I was going to defer to Harry in the sense that depending on the Powermax system you have, there's also a mode for continuous cutting, correct?
Yes, it's called expanded metal mode, cutting mode. And there we enable the torch arc to remain on between the metal cuts. So you can imagine every time you start the arc on a torch, every time the arc pilot comes on, a little bit of hafnium is spitting out the end of the electrode. So if you're able to cut expanded metal without re-triggering every time, you're actually going to prolong the life of your electrode. And if you're changing your electrode and nozzle together, which we recommend you do, then you're saving yourself quite a bit of money.
Yes, we do have we'll do excessive pilot arcing, and that can really shorten the life of your consumable. So in general, that it's pilot the torch. Some people need it; they use it to be able to see, but it can really have an effect on your consumables.
Another effect on your consumables is where you pilot. We recommend that you actually pilot next to the arc or the metal that you're going to cut, not start the arc in the air and then transfer the metal.
Another question, what is the correct distance between the tip of the torch or the nozzle and the metal you are cutting? So they're asking about...
I don't think I heard the whole question.
What should the arc length be?
Well, it sounds like they're wondering about holding a standoff versus drag cutting. Is there a recommended distance? Does it make a difference in consumable life?
So with manual cutting, by hand, there's that castellation on the drag shield, and that's electrically isolated. We want to drag that right on the material, and that is your standoff height. And for mechanized cutting on a table, the standoff heights correspond to the correct cut chart. So every line of the cut chart is going to have a torch to work distance that we want to follow. And also if you have a variable height control, the arc voltage should maintain it at the correct height.
And the height is more on getting a decent cut quality. So if you got the right torch to work distance, and this castellations on a handheld torch help maintain that, then you're going to get the best cut quality. If you're using a handheld torch and you're maintaining a standoff, because maybe you're accustomed to doing that because you're you learned how to cut using oxyfuel. So if you're using the torch and you're also keeping a standoff, well, you're over a longer distance, and it's going to affect the cut quality, and it's also going to allow that out, and it could affect the nozzle life because it's putting pressure on the surface of that nozzle. So you could see some premature nozzle wear.
Next question, when cutting with a Powermax 45 XP, Scott, I think this is for you. The arc stops and the consumables not installed correctly light comes on. If I clean the surface between the nozzle and electrode, this fixes the problem. Why is this happening?
Yeah, a few things, and I'll try and get through it. If the auto breaks up, let me know. So it's a contact machine, meaning the electrode and nozzle being when we go to fire the arc. A few things can cause that to not come back into contact. If the swirl ring is old and out of round, that swirl ring is also the bearing surface that the electrode needs to move back and forth on. And also over tightening the retaining cap can have a similar effect. Also inspect the spring that's on the electrode. Every electrode there comes with a new spring, and we want to make sure that spring is in good shape. I hear about this a lot with an old swirl ring. A way to test that is to take the electrode and swirl ring out and see if the electrode moves freely within the swirl ring. If it's got any hang up at all, it can cause a torch stuck open or torch stuck closed fault.
Okay, so just paraphrasing, since you were breaking up just a tiny bit, but it could be the electrode, the swirl ring, so maybe check those, or it could also be that you're over tightening the consumables. So
yes,
okay.
And also, those are very simple things to try. There's many other more intense things we could try, and you could call into tech service, and we can give you the pinouts of the torch and test it with an ohm meter and see if there's something else bigger going on.
Question on argon versus air, and does that affect the kerf edge?
Argon is specifically used only with the Powermax 45 XP for marking applications. It's not advised gas for any cutting applications in any other system, including the 45XP. It's only intended for marking with the 45XP. Now, if you need to get better cut quality, let's say on stainless steel, you could be using F5 gas or nitrogen. F5 gas would be the preferred gas for cutting stainless steel. It's going to give you better edge quality, less of a burn effect to the cut edge.
We have a question about changing out the air regulator, and someone wants to know how hard is it to change out the air regulator?
I think they're probably talking about the electronic air regulator on the inside. So the 45XP, the 6585, and up in the Powermax line has that internal air pressure regulator. There's some FSBs on how to do it. The cover has to come off. It's relatively simple to change. There's really good instructions in the service bulletin on how to do it.
Okay, and where would people find that field service bulletin, Scott? Is it on our website?
It can be downloaded in the document library off the website. Let me get the part number for that FSB. Hold on.
And that FSB would also be included with the replacement part in the package as you receive it.
Can a small oxyacetylene file be used to clean the orifices of consumables?
I've used an oxyacetylene file on my oxyacetylene tips all the time, so I know exactly what they're talking about. I would say that if say for example the hole in the nozzle is still round and cylindrical and is in good shape, I don't see why not. You got nothing to lose. I imagine that the holes that they're talking about are probably in the outer shield, and I don't see an issue with that either.
We have someone asking who just wanted a little bit more information on the Hypertherm Cutting Institute. So I will talk about that really quickly. If you go to hypertherm.com and you click the Learn tab at the top of the page, you'll see the Hypertherm Cutting Institute right on the right-hand side there. It is free to join, and there is all kinds of e-learning. You just basically need to register with your name and email, and I think they ask you a few other questions, and you can then access all of these e-learning classes. So we have about 1 minute left. I don't know if Harry, Brenda, or Scott, if you have any last words or a question that you want to answer really quickly. If not, we'll just wrap things up.
I saw one brief question in there. Is if the old 45 had a upgraded torch available, and yes, the Duramax torch line is available for that.
Yeah, I didn't have any additional questions to answer, but would like to thank everybody for their attendance today. I do think we hit a record, and we appreciate all the questions. And if you have any additional questions, by all means, reach out to us. Tech service, Scott's available, and everybody else on that team is available on call, by email. And if there's any questions for me or Brenda, by all means, reach out to us as well.
So thank you, everyone. You will receive an email early next week that will have the slides that you saw today, a link to watch the recorded version, and the certificate of attendance. I will be sure to include the number to reach our technical service team in case you have any additional questions for Scott or anyone else on that team. That will be in the email that you receive as well. So thank you again, and have a nice rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.